Kindred souls. Welcome back to another episode of Lux Smart and Enlightenment. I'm Lux, and on this channel, I talk about how healing, wisdom, and integration, using the tools you picked up along the way, become the story that you tell in expression of your best, most enlightened self, and in hopes that you're sharing, you're expressing your enlightenment journey spurs somebody else onwards towards theirs. So if you're here because you found that interesting, or you find the topic of this video interesting, I'm so honored that you're here because you're doing healing and service to me by letting me share this part of my enlightenment journey with you. So today's topic is called the anatomy of sacred rage. This is a very potent and powerful concept in my life right now that is absolutely motivating and creating all kinds of beneficial changes in my life. So I would love to break it down for you, explain more about what sacred rage is and isn't, as well as how you can use it to move forward and make changes in your life. So I'll obviously start by defining that, to me, in my experience, sacred rage is the intense angry fire that arises when your truth has been silenced for too long. This rage usually comes up after periods of self-abandonment, people-pleasing, or spiritual bypassing. We're going to talk about what sacred rage is, what it's calling you to do, as well as the very important distinguishing details between reactive egoic rage and sacred intuitive rage. But to me, sacred rage, the way you identify it, is by understanding that it's the intense anger you feel of the injustice of your truth being either silenced or not upheld, as in a boundary has been crossed. So this is very relevant in my life right now because I have I've spent several years actually understanding that part of the friction in my life is due to connections I keep trying to keep with people that no longer resonate with me, because as I grow and change and gain new energetic base point, as well as fundamental belief system changes, the friction and the dissonance between me and another person becomes so great that it is no longer tolerable, that our difference in both belief sets as well as energetic resonance, the way we carry ourselves, is so different that I have become enraged at the fact that the relationship or the connection can no longer continue. It needs space or it needs to dissolve because it's not changing with inside the connection. And this is very much with my twin, this rage I feel, to be quite honest with you, is about the fact that as I grow and change belief systems, the dissonance between us is no longer tolerable and it's causing dishonor. And I'll get into that more in a minute as to why, because it's not about him, as well as it's not about the other people that I have felt this kind of intense triggering anger, but in the right way. So I want to back up just a second and distinguish that when you feel sacred rage, it feels like you're recognizing injustice and you're angry for all the very right reasons. And so this is where we start to break out into getting very clear about what is egoic rage and what is intuitive sacred rage, so that I can use my personal example a little better and help you distinguish how I understand what it is now. Because old versions of Lindsay, maybe 5-6 years ago, would have absolutely called a temper tantrum sacred rage if she had heard that term and used it to bypass navigating the situation better. So that is something that maybe you might consider in your finding of this video or this topic, is that to me, the concept of the term sacred rage has not come to my awareness until recently. And I'm sure that that's because old versions of me would have used that term and that concept in the wrong way. And I know that I've done the work in the internal growth to distinguish that my rage is sacred. It's not egoic. It's not a temper tantrum. As well as I my process of moving through it and what I'm being called to do about it is incredibly different than what older versions of me would have done. And I'll explain that in real life as we get to these differences. So, egoic rage says, I need control. Egoic rage is about the injustice you feel of a situation that you can no longer control, or it is out of control, or it is head-based injustice. It is fear-based decision making. It is fear-based intolerance of what's going on in your situation. Whereas intuitive sacred rage says, I need alignment. Ego says, I need control. Intuition says, I need alignment. I'm desperate for alignment relief in the situation. The tone of intuition is steady, clean, and directional. It doesn't demand, it invites. So sacred rage is an invitation, whereas egoic rage is demanding. It's imposing. It's manipulative in your search of what to do about it. Rage can be sacred when it becomes clarity and not chaos. Egoic rage becomes more confusing and often creates a sense of futility or feeling helpless about a situation, whereas sacred rage is absolutely empowering. In my experience, I do not feel stuck in any way, shape, or form. I feel called to action and very purposeful action, and it's not even that hard to distinguish what to do, let alone get going in that direction of what to do about it. Keep in mind that a lot of people say that the mind or the ego is loud and intuition is a whisper. And for the most part, I do agree with that statement, and I do believe that that's true. But to me, sacred rage is when your soul, your intuition, is speaking loudly because it has to. And it's become to this point where this call towards interaction is a must at this point. And so to me, sacred rage is intuitive. It's just not a whisper. It's one of those few times where the intuition isn't going to be a whisper. So keep that in mind. I encourage you to ask yourself these differentiating questions. So in reflection, in asking yourself if you are experiencing egoic rage or sacred rage, we stop first to identify the deeper emotion under anger. Anger is often the surface or top level emotion that is over top of either or fear or hurt or even both. I feel it's both in my particular circumstance at the moment. So when we understand, what am I angry about? Am I angry because I'm hurt or scared or both? Then you can ask yourself, what am I trying to protect in this anger? What am I upset about? What am I scared or hurt in the protection of this? If the answer in what you're trying to protect is my image, my control, my comfort, my circumstances, even some needs that we think we have, that's ego, that's head level. If the answer is my truth, my boundaries, my sovereignty, my purpose, my wellness, my well-being, it's intuitive. And I can't be certain with you in every situation, or I can't give you enough real life scenarios in one episode that would clarify, my boundaries, my purpose, or you know what I mean? There's just so many situations to each of us individuals where that's going to be a hard call. But I encourage you, and I believe you have the capability, especially if this topic is coming up in your awareness right now, that you have the power and the ability to distinguish what this is. And if you need to take space with it to dig deeper and dig deeper in yourself as to what you're angry about, hurt about, what you're trying to protect, and what's been let down, what line has been crossed, I believe you can and you will. It's important right here also to understand that your rage can be directed at someone. Just because someone is involved or you're experiencing intense anger at someone doesn't mean it's not sacred rage. And I think a really great example of this, regardless of whether you're spiritual or religious or not, is Jesus. In the book of Matthew, Jesus was so upset about the injustice and the wrongdoings that were going on in the temple that even Jesus yelled at people and kicked people out and flipped over tables and messed up money. And in that moment, he was showing us an example of sacred rage, of righteous rage, because yeah, maybe Jesus shouldn't have yelled at people or flipped over tables. He was having a human carcass experience just like we are, but his anger was righteous. Righteous in its purpose, in its call to what is being revealed in the injustice you're feeling. Um, so keep in mind, you can be incredibly angry with someone. However, you're also able to step back and understand that your rage is not solely directed at a person and what they're doing or not doing. In my case, I can very much see that my rage is more conceptually about what's been tolerated, what's been going on. The framework of the relationship is no longer healthy. Not that this person needs to change, because they don't have to. They get to do however and whatever they want to. They get to believe and operate at the systems they do now without ever having to do anything about it, simply because in our connection that would be necessary. They don't have to. And so you're able in this sacred rage to understand that it's not just about that person or thing or situation you're experiencing rage in. You're able to zoom back and understand that conceptually it's deeper than that. So, recap just a little bit. Egoic rage says, I need control, I need manipulation because I feel futile, I feel helpless or stuck in this situation and I can no longer tolerate it. Sacred rage says, I'm so desperate for alignment, for relief, for a call back to self-sovereignty. I've been abandoning what is best for me. It's an invitation, and it's very, very clear. Even in rage, you can still listen and see clearly, whereas egoic rage, definitely not the case. Something else that would be a really interesting point to distinguish here too is that old Lindsay's egoic rage absolutely caused catastrophic meltdowns and catastrophic damage, both to myself, my situation, my circumstances, the other person or people involved. Egoic raging Lindsay, older versions of Lindsay would have absolutely caused damage in this rage, whereas sacred rage, although I can express it, I can be angry, I can be fiercely intense with the conversation, I can cry, I can be feeling all the human things, but I can be clear and discerning, as well as kind as possible as you can be. It's a strong softness that you carry when you're ready to do something about this sacred rage. And you're not out to do damage. You're not. Because the call to action is very clearly something else than that. So that's what we're going to bridge into right now, is that you take this sacred rage and you let it become the guidance. It burns away the illusion, and it reveals where your boundaries need to be rebuilt and where you're being called to pivot, both as a soul and as a human. Trusting sacred rage means you're learning to listen without combusting. You're seeing what's illusion and what's truth. You're understanding what boundaries have been crossed and what need to be rebuilt and strengthened. And the rage becomes the compass towards the points, the identification points of which you've outgrown. This is an important part to distinguish here, that for me in my personal experience, just as much of this rage that I'm feeling is grief, because I feel the grief of the loss of this connection because of what I've outgrown energetically, belief system wise, in many ways. And that rage is also directed at myself, not only for how long I feel my human feels like it took to get to this point, but for the ways I let myself down, the ways I did not give myself self-love, sovereignty, and respect. And so at this point, I would ask you that if you're feeling those things as well, take a minute to give yourself the time and space to process forgiveness and grace for both yourself and the others involved in your rage situation, because you need it just as badly too. I need that grace and that forgiveness to myself, knowing that there's no such thing as too many times the boundary was crossed, because you can say that and you can feel that. But at this point, I have to give myself the forgiveness and understanding that it's okay, because it was just enough, and now I'm ready. Now I'm ready to do something different about it. So as much as you might feel anger for yourself for the injustice and how you've let it continue on in this scenario as long as you could have needed to. You are now ready, based on this sacred rage, to do something about it. However, I will add a caveat to that I have experienced moments of sacred rage in a particular connection that I did not necessarily do the full call to action on, or I did layers of it, and then it came back around again. And so, again, to me, that is where my anger is turned towards myself, is in feeling that I took more cycles than necessary in experiencing sacred rage in this specific situation. But yet, I was still working on it. I was still processing, and I was moving through changes in layers, and those layers have to be okay. It's okay. That's my journey. That's what it was. And now I'm ready to move to the next layer or move on completely, because the call is still there. The rage is present again, and I'm feeling clearer and clearer about the direction that needs to be gone in. So give yourself grace and space for it. Even if that rage comes up multiple times, you're still doing your best. You're still doing the pieces of work necessary to move towards the point of sacred rage, which is relief, wholeness, mission, purpose. The rage is an invitation to return to your purpose, your mission, which is to live in embodiment of all that is you. Once the rage is cleared, you've moved through it as a soul, you've got clarity, you've got direction, and you understand what you need to do. You also have to soothe your human, which of course at this point we can mention things like movement, creation, prayer, stillness, journaling. Do yourself a favor and soothe your human as well, because it can be not dealing with it, the energy in your human can become a temptation to lead towards vindictive anger, vindictive rage. And that is where I would encourage you to try to step back and go, no, do I understand that these choices are for me and they're a call towards healing and wellness and what's best for me, rather than being vindictive towards the other person or the situation that I'm angry about. So soothe your human, use the clarity that you've gained in the rage to soothe your soul, which is to move towards returning to you. Something that I would like you to be aware of in this process as you're coming down from the rage, you're moving through it. You start to feel this motivation, but it's a soft motivation. It's soft but strong in this deep devotion towards what you need to do to rebuild those boundaries, or come back to self-sovereignty, or go back to that version of you or that energetic set point of you that you wish to be at. It's a conviction, but it's a soft conviction, which is why I like the word devotion better, because it's a very clear, purposeful motivation, but in a kind and gentle way. It's an encouragement in the realization that you're no longer fighting for space or control in a situation or in a relationship or in a space with someone, but you're returning to self, you're returning to your frame, and understanding that what I'm doing and choosing is about returning to all that is me. When you follow sacred rage to its root, you find your purpose, which it's okay if this isn't your main focus at this point, but to me, as humans, as souls living human carcass lives, experiences, when you understand the root of the sacred rage is to lead you back to your purpose. To me, the purpose is to live as embodiment of truth, love, and alignment. And each of us as souls in human bodies are being called to do that in our own ways. So, in reflection, I would ask you to consider yourself or others that you know that may be experiencing sacred rage, or the call to ask yourself, is my rage sacred or is it egoic? Am I developing clarity from this rage, and what am I going to do about it? How am I going to get relief and move towards what's best for me and my wholeness? Understanding that it still feels terrible. Rage still feels awful. It's a big feeling and it's hard to get through, but it's just what your soul called for to prompt you to move you in a direction that's best for you. And so you, or if someone you know is going through that, I would encourage you to sit with yourself and get clear on those things. And I hope that something I've shared with you in this episode today not only helps you distinguish if your anger, if your rage is sacred, but how you can move through it, how much relief and how much momentum and empowerment you can get on the other side of sacred rage, and how your life is going to change because of it. So thank you for listening. Keep seeking, keep softening, keep showing up. Remember, the light you're looking for is the light you already are. Take care.